Well, good morning, everyone. I think I'm getting an echo. Hold on. Now. Now it's good. Okay, I think we're better now. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I want to say hello to all the live stream people too, who are sitting comfortably in their rocking chairs or their lazy boys, listening to this. We know you're with us, so we just want to acknowledge you and say we hope you get here at some point. So today, we're completing the circle. We started out with slowing down, and then we entered into some sharing of stories. And then we stepped back from sharing and moved into stillness and solitude. And in that stillness and solitude, there was the freedom to sort of let down and surrender. And if we just stayed with those 5 practices, this would be a rather interior spirituality. But this 6th one takes us out into the larger world and broadens our connection. And as you might have guessed, because all of these spiritual disciplines have begun with the letter S, you might know that today is solidarity. And for our prayer this morning, I want to tell a story and then give us a moment with some music. So I worked in Liberia, West Africa for 2 years. And in the 2nd year I was there, the tension in the country was growing. There was already some ripple or premonition that some kind of civil war would break out. And my housemate, my community mate, was a nurse from Canada, and I, who lived together, we lived right across the street from the slum where we worked. But at the entrance to the slum was the police and army barracks. So we saw guns all the time. We were cautioned to be prudent in what we had to say, even in our homes, because people could be passing by. We had jalousie pane windows, which meant they didn't seal completely, but if someone wanted to stand outside our window, they could hear what was going on inside. So I was going about my business, as were all the other Catholic mission people, when we got news the last week of Lent. It was the week before Palm Sunday, and it was 1987. And we got news that one of the SMA priests, who was a philosophy professor at the university in Monrovia, had been arrested. In his class, he had often encouraged the students to sort of take up their role as citizens. And that challenge made its way to their White House. Yes, they had a White House too. The president, Samuel Kayando, did not like this news, and he took it to be a direct offense against him and his authority. So he sent his policemen to Father Hickey's house and arrested him. Now, at that point, already we knew that if someone is arrested, they were in trouble. Any number of things could happen to them. Most frequently, they were tortured. Sometimes they were killed out on the beach. So our regional superior, Father John Feeney, jumped in his car and fled to the jail where he was being held. And he literally stood outside the jail cell so that nothing could happen and Father Hickey wouldn't disappear. He knew a lot of the jailers because he had come from a mission down south, and a lot of these guys had moved to the city and gotten jobs as police. So he could say to them, "Hey, I know your ma, I know your pa," and they knew he knew them. So there was a little bit of control there because he kind of knew their people. So the word traveled very fast. And of course, you can imagine there was a ripple of anxiety and fear that went through many of us. Was this going to be the beginning of some sort of oppression or even some kind of persecution of Catholic mission folks? Once a month, all of the Catholic mission ministers, unfortunately mostly white, but we did bring in as many of the local priests and sisters as we could. We would meet for a day of recollection and support and so forth. Well, this particular Saturday, I was asked if I would put together some sort of a prayer service. So all week I'd been going, wow, how do you put together a prayer service in this time of tremendous anxiety? What do we do with that? How can we use it as an opportunity to strengthen ourselves and each other? The Friday before Palm Sunday, we got news that in fact, Father Hickey was going to be exiled. He was going to be put on a plane and sent out of the country. And again, Father Feeney stayed with him. He sat on a chair outside the jail cell just to make sure that that particular police car that was supposed to take Father Hickey to the airport made it to the airport. He was sent to the airport on that Saturday morning and decided to come after he'd been to the airport to the Catholic mission gathering. I was a young missionary and I was fretting about how do you put this together? And that very week, a care package arrived. The care package was from a Redemptorist priest friend of mine, Father Paul Curry, who I've known since like 1980. And he had actually come to Liberia to see the work and gone home. And he kind of knew what we needed and how I needed things. And he sent me this. Do you remember what these were? They're called cassettes. And this cassette was Rory Cooney's Do Not Fear to Hope. You're probably familiar with the song. It was new to me, but I was inspired by the song. And so I ended up taking photographs and making slides and putting together a slideshow of our mission community at work with a few extras along the way. And I paired it with that song. Well, God was with us. Father Feeney arrived, coming back from the airport, said, yes, Father Hickey is on the plane. He's being sent back to the United States, but he's safe. And so we had our service, we had our input, and then at the end of the morning, it was my turn. So I just simply explained that I'd put together this little prayer service to sort of help us in a time of fear and anxiety to find some hope. I don't have that slideshow with me, although I have some of those individual slides still back in Massachusetts. But I have found that Rory Cooney did a rendition of this song, which kind of says the same thing. So this song became a song of solidarity for me. And I think also it generated that same sense of we're in this together, we are bonded. The fear does not have to control us. We can have hope. And so I offer this to you this morning as we begin to talk about solidarity. And as you watch the video, you may reflect on your own experiences of having worked with groups and experienced some kind of solidarity yourself. I think you can see how powerful that could be to people who were struggling. And I think we've all struggled. We've probably all been in situations where the people that we accompanied were either threatened or held down. And we were there. Maybe we were held down too. But something of solidarity between us and those we serve became an important part of our ministry. So let's look at this solidarity practice. This practice connects us responsibly with a larger creation. When it comes to our 6 practices, the genuine outflowing of surrender in many ways allows us to fall into right relationship with God, and right relationship with all of God's creation. And in that right relationship, we can experience a deeper harmony and a sense of at oneness. So what is the value for us spiritually when it comes to practicing solidarity? I'm going to mention 3. The first is that when we practice solidarity, we foster right relationships specifically with God. We get in touch with our creatureliness and with the Creator. We don't confuse those two. And in so doing, it is another opportunity to bolster humility within us. And as I said a couple of days ago, anytime that you bolster humility, it's a good thing in the spiritual life. So this right relationship with God recognizes the generosity of the creator and our dependence on God. And of course, it opens the door for even greater intimacy with God when we have that experience of oneness and connection. But it goes to a second degree too. Number 2 is it generates right relationship with others. It acknowledges that as fellow creatures on the earth and fellow human beings, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to each other. We have a responsibility to the earth. But when we move into that sense of right relationship with others in our practice of solidarity, a bonding can occur that really allows for a sense of connectedness. And it can heal alienation. So we move into a deeper sense of affinity with one another and with other creatures. The divisions between us perhaps diminish a bit, and we connect. And then thirdly, when we practice solidarity, we broaden our awareness of the levels of relationship that we are a part of. And I like to think of it as a series of concentric circles. The deepest circle, of course, is me and God as we are connected with one another. Then there's myself connected with my close friends and the intimate others, perhaps those I live with. Then the next connection is community, those who I live with directly, those who I'm somehow connected with. But it goes beyond that. It goes into the larger relationship with the planet, with the trees, with the sky, with other creatures, to the larger universe and beyond. We foster a sense of relationship with the global family, and the global family now includes brother and sister plants and animals, brother and sister creation, When I was doing my undergraduate studies, I mentioned my friend, Father Gene, who was one of my mentors, but also who I worked with. And he used to say that God is like a thread, not thread, thread. And the thread goes into Mary Beth's big toe. And it unites all the little individual cells that make her up. And each of those cells is unique, and they knit together into unique organs, unique skin, a unique person that is never replicated. But it doesn't stop there. It goes out of Mary Beth's ear and goes into Sarah and knits her together. Again, all those unique little cells connected by this thread of God that holds her together. And it goes out of her ear into the trees outside, knitting all those beautiful individual cells together. But it doesn't stop there. It goes out into the universe, into the stars, into the clouds, and beyond, holding all of that together. Now, what happens if Mary Beth and Sarah have a tiff? Oftentimes, human beings, when they have a tiff, they pull away, don't they? They kind of, some tension goes into the relationship. And you can stop and think about what effect that might have on that thread of God that's holding them together. You want to keep that loose and flowing. You want to keep the passageways and the connection between ourselves and each other open and fluid. And you might even say moist in some way so that it passes easily. That same priest, Father Gene, we ran a summer camp together. And one summer we were at camp and fifth grade boys were there. And oh my goodness, what happened? We had a little canteen where the kids could buy some candy, and it was open at maybe half an hour every day. Parents gave us money for them. Well, somebody got into somebody else's candy. And suddenly rumor was out, there's a thief here. And these little boys responded just like we would. They started to kind of hunker down, hold their candy, pull away from each other. So the thread between them tightened. So Father Gene, who was a master at illustrations, went into the freezer and he pulled out a brick of butter, frozen. And he walked outside to where the boys were lined up to come in for lunch. And he started waving this brick of butter between them. And they're watching him and they're saying, Father Gene, what are you doing? And they were starting to laugh, of course. And he said, the thread of God has gotten tight and I am lubricating it. And they did just that. They started laughing and they started kind of feeling sheepish. And by the end of the afternoon, they were ready for the sacrament of reconciliation. Things were settled. Candy was returned. They were back in sync with each other and with God. So sometimes we need something to lubricate that thread that passes between us and even passes between us and this larger world that we now claim responsibility and relationship with it. Once we know we have a responsibility and a relationship with this larger world, we want to act differently. We want to change some of our patterns so that other people and other beings around the world can live a healthy existence too. That's solidarity too. Is this making sense? Kind of following it? So how do we practice this solidarity that leads us into stewardship and responsibility for our earth and for one another? Well, I think when we try to practice it, compassion and connectedness is engendered, and it's often engendered most readily by a sharing of vulnerability. Vulnerability connects us. Vulnerability brings us closer to one another. When someone tells their story to you where they display their vulnerability, don't you find yourself kind of leaning in a bit and sensing and picking up the pathos, maybe the pain? We all are vulnerable creatures. And when one person's vulnerability is shared, it taps into our own. We can relate to that as human beings. So our vulnerability sort of becomes the passageway through which we connect with one another. Now, I sometimes think that one of the blessings about vulnerability is that it sort of equalizes the playing field. It reduces the temptation we have for condescension, for lifting ourselves up over another person, because when that person shares their vulnerability, now suddenly we're one, because we can relate to that ourselves. So it keeps our solidarity and our practice fresh. It greases the wheels. And it reduces our tendency to objectify another. When we know their story, we're less likely to objectify them and limit them according to what our assessment is. When I came back from Liberia, as I said to you the other day, I was sick. I had gone to Liberia to practice solidarity. Solidarity that I knew of was Lech Walesa. Remember him? The Polish anti-communist who called his movement solidarity, and it was an attempt to pull people out of the communist control and give them rights and so forth. So I went to the slum expecting to practice solidarity in a socio-political way, to stand in solidarity with the poor, and I did that. But I discovered when I came back that I couldn't do that as well anymore. I was sick. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the get up and go. I wasn't even sure where to do that in Helena, Montana, where I was with my family trying to recuperate. I discovered that I had to develop some flexibility in my understanding of solidarity, that I had to broaden it in some way and adjust the practice then to a way that was both age appropriate and situationally respectful of my limits. So as I dwelt with that, I started to pray, of course, like, well, what is the form of solidarity that God would seek of me in this case? And wouldn't you know, slowly, I came up with like 10 different forms of solidarity that I had never seen before as being forms of solidarity. And I want to share those briefly with you. The first one is what I call relational intimate solidarity. Relational intimate solidarity. And that's the solidarity you have with your best friends. Those people that you can go to. They'll lift you up. They might hold you. They get it. They know some of your story. There's a connection. There's a bond. Hopefully, all of us on some level have experienced relational intimate solidarity. A second form of solidarity that I experienced was familial solidarity. I said the other day, my family did not approve of me going to Africa. So I had to kind of wade through that. They didn't know what to do with me after I came back, and they were scared of the stories. But what I discovered was they could circle the wagons. When something was needed, they could do that. My Nana was right there waiting for me, opened the door, made a bed for me, and said, this is where you're going to recuperate. Blood is thicker than water. We have a connection with the people from which we've come, huh? We experience this solidarity, you know, when you come together for a wedding or a funeral. or a family reunion, and all the stories come out about old Uncle Herbert when he used to do this and this. And people laugh and grieve together and pass on the story. So that is familial solidarity. Another form of solidarity that I experienced when I was overseas was what I call ecclesial solidarity. This connection as church, this bonding, because we were all Christians working together, Catholics working specifically in my mission. But we can extend that to the fourth one, which is ecumenical solidarity. We probably all worked in contexts where ecumenical ministers worked together. And because they worked together, it was a better situation. We worked with Lutherans and Methodists over there and so forth. And so many things got done because the Christian larger mission came together and supported each other. I know when Pope Francis died and I watched his funeral, I was just aware how powerfully that funeral was an experience of ecclesial solidarity and ecumenical solidarity, of all people of goodwill even, coming together to honor this very, very good man, this powerful leader. Then we jump into the one that I thought was the only form of solidarity, socio-political solidarity. Takes a lot of energy for that one. You're right in the muck with people, and you're often trying to help them better themselves. You're often trying to fight for some sort of change. In a way, I think that the No Kings movement in this country right now, where a lot of people are stepping forward and challenging things in the culture and in the government, is a form of socio-political solidarity. Then let's look at another avenue. Let's look at liturgical solidarity. That's the solidarity you experience when you gather around the table, huh? When you come together to share the body and blood of Jesus Christ, and you are one. And we may not do that well after we leave the altar, but for that time, at that altar, we are one in a liturgical solidarity. Many of you are teachers, huh? There is such a thing as ministerial solidarity, which many people experience when people who are doing the same work that we're doing come together for meetings or gatherings or conferences and compare notes, compare ideas, weep with one another, celebrate with one another, talk about the work. So ministerial solidarity is also an important one. I'm going to add ecological solidarity because this has just become sort of a relatively recent form. And of course, Pope Francis championed it. But we have a responsibility for our earth, for the water, for the air. What are the ways in which we can practice ecological solidarity in our stewardship, in our recycling, in the way in which we treat our earth? Now, here's one that might surprise you: gender solidarity. I honestly didn't really have this one until I was with a group of women at one point, and they said, well, what about women? I'm like, what about them? They said, well, we have a certain amount of solidarity with one another when we come together. We can talk about the struggle of being women in a patriarchal culture. I said, you got me there. That's true. So there is such a thing as gender solidarity too. The last one, to me, is one of the most powerful ones. And it's what I call mystical contemplative solidarity. This is one of those forms of solidarity that you can ready yourself for, but you can't necessarily give yourself. It requires grace. It is the experience of our friend Thomas Merton on the corner of 4th and Walnut in Louisville, Kentucky. When he stood there, I think he was there for a doctor's appointment or something. And all of a sudden, he's waiting for the light to change, and all of a sudden, whoosh, there it was, this sense of connection and love for everyone standing on that street corner. This sense of, I love these people. Do I know them? No, but I know them. Deep down inside, I have this sense of connection and love for them. For years, he had prepared himself for that one moment of grace when God bestowed mystical, contemplative solidarity. And he received it and celebrated it. And thank God he wrote about it. Some of us may have experienced that form of solidarity, that gift from God. So these are 10 arenas of solidarity, and they interconnect and they move back and forth. But I think it's important to remember that we can't practice the same forms of solidarity all the time. Life changes, bodies change, situations change, and we have to be flexible enough to adjust our forms, but to be aware that we are invited to practice it in some way. So when I came back from Africa and I was just too depleted to march or to say anything beyond I'm sick, I had to relinquish my socio-political solidarity that I thought was what I was called to do. But I picked up things like relational, intimate solidarity and familial solidarity in a surprising way. I began to put my energies more towards mystical, contemplative solidarity with the people that I had left behind, that I never got to say goodbye to in Liberia. So I began to meditate with them and for them and think of them. So they're going to change. And we have to adjust, and we have to be realistic about which forms of solidarity we can practice. So there is a sheet on your tables. This is a reflection sheet on solidarity. So there they are, the 10 that I've just mentioned. And I'm going to ask you just right now for a moment, just kind of casually, the forms of solidarity you are most at ease with, just circle those. Just put a circle around them. No one's going to see this, but you know where you're comfortable. And you may not be practicing this form of solidarity right now, but you have in the past and you felt good about it. It felt appropriate. Now reflect on how your practice of solidarity might have changed over the years. And which forms do you feel resistance to? Put a square around those. We all have some. We're just not comfortable going out and doing that. Now that resistance, it's just possible that there's an invitation by the Holy Spirit within that resistance. And I'd like you to reflect on that today. Pray a bit about it. Connect with God and say, well, what do you think? Don't make all the conclusions on your own. Dialogue, listen, pay attention to God. And then that last question, in your practice of solidarity, have you ever experienced joy? I know I have. I think I experienced joy that day I played Do Not Fear to Hope, and I saw the faces of my colleagues light up and relax. We were in tough times. It was going to get tougher. But for that moment, there was this experience of connection and solidarity. We have to also, I think, recognize that it's going to be a challenge for us to live in this very, very difficult world. There are a lot of tensions. And we have to figure out a way to live gracefully in the tension between the worlds. Sometimes I liken it to a teeter-totter. I was talking about this the other day with someone, and I said, and we had the teeter-totter at the end of our block, which was the old-fashioned seesaw, where you had the plank of wood. You can't teeter-totter, can you, all by yourself? You need another person? Aha, but you can. And I figured it out. You run up the center of the wood beam, position yourself right on the fulcrum. Plant your feet, there it is again. Plant, flex the knees, and shift, juggle, adjust. And I got so good at it, I could do it almost without anyone noticing I was moving. But I was always shifting, adjusting, accommodating, balancing. So it's a good metaphor for all the polarities that we have to balance. We have to stand gracefully in the middle, hold our position, ground ourselves, but flex ourselves internally and externally to go with the challenges, to take in new ideas, to take in new people, to open the door to connection. Does this make sense to you? You connect with a little bit of solidarity that you've had in your life. So we're going to close now. I'm going to send you out to the good God with your little paper in hand and have that conversation with God about, well, what form of solidarity or what forms of solidarity would you like me to try out in the near future? And I want to play as our closing song, one of Donna Pena's songs, Against the Grain, because I think solidarity often calls us to go against what is the norm, to stand up, to stand firm, to move against the assumptions of the culture, the assumed thoughts, the assumed positions, and move against those in order to bring about change and justice. Because this particular practice is definitely connected with justice, peace, and mercy. This one brings us into that kind of relationship and that kind of responsibility. So let us close this morning listening to Against the Grain. And I hope you have a wonderful day with God talking about solidarity.
When I look at all the earth, when I see your people, my God, I want to cry. O Lord, where is your love? Yes, Lord. Where is your love?
We have seen and we have all been told, and our ways are past too young from old. He was born and suffered through the pain, and he rose to move against the grain.
we hear the battle cry of the children? Do we sit and close our eyes to their pain? Or do we stand and move against the grain?
No more sorrow, no more pain. Cease your silence, come, O rain. No more sorrow, no more pain. Cease your silence, come, O rain. Come, O rain, and wash the blood from the earth. Come, O rain, and bring us all to a new birth. As He died to give us life again, we shall rise